So before we begin today's player profile for the NFL Draft for 2021, exciting news. You can now follow me on Twitter at SkolOhio, SKOLHIO, same way it's spelled here. I wanted to do a Twitter account that you could follow me at. That way we can sort of touch base and keep track and do more in-the-moment reactions, more reactions, to stuff around the league that's happening. It's difficult to, have every single storyline or every single news event to set up, make a video, because there's a little bit of minimum production quality that goes into YouTube videos, but Twitter is just whatever we want it to be. So follow me over there and we'll have a good time. So don't forget to subscribe also too if you haven't already. So we're getting back into player profiles, and I think this is going to be probably the bread and butter of our content for at least the majority of the next month. I honestly don't believe that we're going to see a lot happen until the free agent period. All we're going to be doing is just circling back about the same rumors and trade speculation and whatnot. So we have a decent set of videos on players for the 2021 NFL Draft. You can check out the playlist on the channel. I'll link it in the description below. If I remember to this time, because I always say I'm going to do that and it never happens. So hopefully I'll remember to do that during the editing process. But I want to build up a much better database, at least try to get through everybody that's potentially going to be drafted in the first round. Ultimate goal is to get about all of the first, second, and third rounders. Probably not enough time to do that, but that is what we're shooting for. So today's player of topic is Jaelan Phillips, the edge rusher from Miami. He is a redshirt junior, 6'5", 258 pounds, depending on which website you get your information from. Originally recruited and played for UCLA. He was a 5-star recruit, but injuries sort of derailed his experience at UCLA. The wrist, the concussions, it goes on and on. And then he gets to transfer to Miami, and all of a sudden everything comes together. He gets to play on this really talented defensive line with Quincy Roche, and just it has the freedom to just do whatever he needs to do to get to the quarterback. And he's one of those players that I've caught on to lately, only because I've just been introduced to him more recently. Because, he's always been one of the edge rushers that I've looked at for the Minnesota Vikings. And if you're not a fan of the Vikings, welcome. This can also apply to your team as well. But Jaelan Phillips, I recently got introduced to him a little bit more in depth because of the 2-for-1 Draft podcast that is done by PFF, where they had an interview with Brevin Jordan, his teammate from Miami, and they asked Austin Gale asked him a question about Gregory Rousseau and Jaelan Phillips, and I'll never forget Brevin Jordan's reaction to how to describe the two players, and he said, quote, "They are a problem, right? Greg is a problem. Jaelan is a problem. They are really freakish athletes at the positions." And it's kind of interesting that we don't get more, more hype or more discussion about Jaelan Phillips, but there's a bevy of reasons for that, and we'll get into those in a minute. But first, let's recap his college career, which took off, of course, in 2020. Beginning in 2018, in his first season with UCLA, he managed to play 6 games. Hold on a second. I'm not ready with my stat sheet. That was notes for another video I plan to do tomorrow. In 2018, he played 6 games, 16 solo tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 21 tackles total. Yes, I read off a stat sheet because it's a lot easier than turning my head and looking at the board. The board is something for you to look at, so I hope you enjoy that. 2019, only played in 4 games, 12 solo tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, 20 tackles total. Those are, of course, years that are shortened by injury. Then he gets to go to Miami. The whole thing comes together, appears in 10 games, gets 21 solo tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 45 tackles for loss. Over the final 7 games, he is able to generate 36 pressures on the quarterback. He's an absolute disruptor. He gets in the backfield. He has the tools and the power to get in the backfield and make the quarterback at least aware that the clock is ticking. And that's something that I like about Jaelan Phillips, is if we could get him on the Minnesota Vikings defensive line, not only could he be a versatile fit as a 4-3 defensive end, paired well with Danielle Hunter, who is also an absolute disruptor. You could use a lot of the same analogies or descriptions to sort of describe the two players together. Teams are absolutely going to be focused on Danielle Hunter, whoever you got inside of the 3 technique, whether it's Michael Pierce or somebody you draft later on. And then Jaelan Phillips on the other side, that's going to be cause for concern for any offensive coordinator who is hoping to protect their quarterback. Last game for Jaelan Phillips, played against North Carolina, 4 tackles recorded, 1.5 tackle for loss, and a half sack credited. The rankings roundup, which is always one of my most favorite things to do to prepare for these videos, is to find out what analysts and members of the draft community around the internet think of this guy. And honestly, this is one of the players where everything is just it's a consensus. Everybody's got him at about the same range. The Draft Network has him at 29 overall. PFF has him at number 28. Tankathon has him at number 27, and Dane Brugler of The Athletic has him at 29 as well. PFF, Tankathon, and Dane all rank him as the number 5 edge rusher in this class. There was a couple differences about who's ahead of him. One person had Zaven Collins, the other two didn't. So that's a matter of opinion. But for it to be this concise is kind of interesting, because I think if you take away the injury history, give him at least one more productive year, or at least a year that was almost as productive as 2020, we're probably talking about him in the same breath as Kwity Paye and Gregory Rousseau, maybe even a little bit higher. This isn't the best draft class in the world for the edge position, let's face facts, because there's a potential that none of them go in the top 15. There's questions about Kwity Paye, there's questions about Gregory Rousseau, you have Jason Owe, Azeez Ojulari, who is probably more of a scheme fit than anything. And then you have guys like Jaelan Phillips and Joseph Asai, and other players that probably won't get their names called until late second round, early third. So I think the problem really is the injury history, and the medicals are going to absolutely need to be vetted by NFL teams before they call this player's name. And it's going to just be more difficult because we are once again facing the unknown. This is going to be the first year that I can remember without a true NFL combine. So they're not going to get to do the in-person medical evaluations that I think that they would normally do. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I suspect the fact that the combine is just going to be completely different, we're going to have to rely a lot on the pro day information to sort of connect the dots. So it just depends. How much are you willing to invest a risk, or invest in a risk for a player who could potentially be 1, maybe 2 concussions away from having to retire and walk away from the game altogether due to those medical reasons? There's also the question of production. He didn't get to have the level of production that jettisons you into first round discussion until you get to Miami. Is that the result of being on a defensive line that's way more talented? Would he be able to carry the load if the Vikings were to, for example, get rid of Danielle Hunter via trade to get more draft picks, and then he is the lone talented edge rusher on the team? Would that stifle him? Would that stifle his production? Would it stifle his development? All kinds of questions remain about that. I think he'd be a nice pair with an established edge rusher like Myles Garrett for the Cleveland Browns, or, as we've said during this video, Danielle Hunter and the Vikings. He's fast and athletic, which is one of the points that I also enjoyed about the Brevin Jordan interview with PFF's 2 for 1 Drafts podcast. Was he mentioned how that when he works out and runs, he runs with the skill players, and he was like, Brevin Jordan's like, guaranteed he's going to run a 4.5 at his pro day. He's going to run a 4.5 And if that holds up, which, I mean, I don't know how well I rely and trust on, pro day 40 times outside of the combine, but it's just what we're going to have to work with. And then, as I said, the versatility is nice. He can be a 4-3 defensive end, 3-4 outside linebacker. Dane really talked him up in his quick description of him on his top 100 big board, about how he uses the tools to get through defenders, keeps his eyes on the ball, and that enables him to make plays on the quarterback. So very intriguing player. It's hard to really decipher where he's going to land. It feels like he's got one of the larger potential gaps in terms of, could he be picked at number 20 overall, or could he be picked in the middle of the second round? It's hard to say. It just depends on how much a team is going to value him and want to inherit the risk of him potentially being one hit away from having to retire because of the medical reason. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you on the next one. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @SkullOhio.